Member of ARSC since 1971, back in the dark ages, and has attended every national conference since then except two. He has been an ARSC president, contributing editor of the journal, originator of the ARSC newsletter, and in 2 terms as second vice president was program chair for 5 conferences. A retired professor of broadcasting, Dr. Biel's dissertation and research was in early broadcast recordings and has made numerous conference presentations. He is assisted today by his daughter Leah, who is likewise a collector and works in quality control at NBC Universal, and now the long-awaited part 2 of the envelope controversy and history of record sleeves.
Okay, I'll start while they're getting set up here. 3 years ago in 2015, I presented the first part of my history of record sleeves and barely got to 1910. This was an outgrowth of a presentation on the history of album covers that I did to prove that Alex Steinweiss did not invent the illustrated cover or even the concept of albums thereof. The creators of that myth had also misinterpreted his observations about album pockets and claimed that before St. Alex came along, all records were housed in plain brown or green sleeves. It might now seem that way, considering that most collections are housed in aftermarket sleeves. But at least after 1910, over 75% of records were sold in printed sleeves. As detailed last time, originally discs were delivered by the manufacturers naked. This probably goes back to Berliner in the 1890s, as there is only this one example so far of a printed sleeve, which may or may not have housed a record. Several items similar to each other have come from separate sources, but most of these seem to have European origin. It might be significant that they have a top flap, because one discovery we made was that the industry did not call these sleeves, but envelopes. In fact, the first company known to have taken their naked Victor shipments and protected them in an envelope actually sealed them. This was the Talking Machine Company of Chicago, run by Arthur D. Greisler. At the industry conventions, companies, especially Victor, actually told their jobbers and dealers that they were not going to individually package their discs, and that it would be up to the jobbers and dealers to do it. It is difficult to definitely state that these are examples made between 1906 and 1908, but these are likely candidates. And note that they do not have sealing flaps. This is one of the actual sleeves that I think comes from that period of time. There's a 12-inch version of it as well. The only known company-provided sleeves were these hard cardboard sleeves for the very expensive Victor discs of Nellie Melba and Francisco Chimano in 1904, which exposed the portrait of the singer when the record was removed. And in 1907, the soft, flexible plastic Marconi Velvetone pressings were delivered by Columbia in a stiff sleeve, which not only protected the soft surface, but made it possible to attach a special gold-plated needle that they used to play them. But despite these precedents, the companies persisted in sending out their discs, still single-sided, without any individual covering. This was even discussed once more at their convention on August 16, 1908. But less than a month later, on September 10, 1908, Columbia announced that from that point on, all their records would be double-sided, and to top that off, each record would be enclosed in an envelope ensuring protection from scratch and dust. This is that envelope. Since March 1908, Columbia had been the American manufacturer of the Italian Fonotipia operatic records. In fact, it was pressure from that Italian company that forced Columbia into the double disc business, because Fonotipia had expected two-sided pressings like they had been producing in Europe. Many British and European companies had been producing double-sided discs and sleeves since late 1906. This Grand Opera envelope was also introduced on September 10th, 1908, when the Fonotipia and the Columbia Symphony series also became double discs. There had been some speculation that the Grand Opera envelope might have really been issued on the occasion of the famous Grand Opera series of 1903, like this owner would like to imagine. But it should be pointed out that this envelope is most often seen as a 12-incher, and the 1903 series was strictly 10 inches. The printing is the same size on both the 10 and 12s. Look at the distance to the edges. We know that these are what were being used in mid-1909, because the Columbia record reprinted the guarantee in the magazine, Talking Machine World, to remind their dealers, we printed on every Columbia double disc envelope, feature it. It will sell Columbia records to new customers, and it will hold your regular customers. Now, Columbia had forced Victor's hand on the double-sided disc, and competitively they had to respond. Now, whereas Columbia had enthusiastically announced a list of 700 double discs, Victor very reluctantly announced a small list of 125 records to their dealers on October 21st, 1908. But there was no matching announcement that they would provide envelopes like Columbia. To the contrary, they announced that to replace the patent and condition sticker that had been on a square label on the back blank reverse side, they had a new label format, which reduced the information to 5 lines of very small type at the bottom of the label. Later reduced to 3 lines, it is likely that Victor did not feel it necessary to use the sleeve for patent and license information. Thus, it appears to me that these are the sleeves that were used during these years. Although the examples that I have seen, some of them list records that are from 1910. This is not to say that they were not providing sleeves as early as the first two-sided Victor discs in 08, for it does seem that the complaints at the jobbers' conventions had ended. But what really gets me about these first Victor and Columbia designs is the contrast with the undecorated labels. Columbia had a naked satyr playing the panpipes to a maiden in flowing robes. Here, Victor has an open horn machine wafting its airy music upwards to a maiden in a flowing robe playing a harp. The backs of Columbia's first sleeves were blank. Victor put theirs to good use, showing lists of records and attractive ways to use their records, showing people and phonographs. When the arch or batwing label was introduced in 1913, the patent and license text was reduced to 1 line on the label and directed the user to refer to an envelope for more complete information. These sleeves seem to fit this description. Some of them have an August 1st, 1913 date. Some of them have January 1st, 1915. There may be some other dates as well. Over at Columbia, the envelopes already shown continued to be used for 4 years until the announcement was made in December 1912 in the Columbia Record, the dealer's magazine. Columbia dealers will be glad to learn that we are adopting a uniform style of heavy envelopes for all records regardless of price. Except for the small quantity left in stock, we have abandoned the lightweight manila envelopes which had been used up to the present time on the lower priced records. I'm not sure the difference. The new envelope is made of specially prepared heavy green paper, appropriately printed with advertising matter and carrying an artistic design. Apart from the fact that it will give us a permanent advertising advantage, we look for a substantial increase in record sales as a result of the new container. These envelopes will also take the place of our present Grand Opera envelopes when that supply is exhausted. Under no circumstances is it our intention to supply these envelopes free, except for one with the purchase of each record. Dealers who want an extra supply of these envelopes, however, can obtain them from their distributors at a nominal cost. I believe that this is the replacement sleeve, but this time the reverse was not blank. Perhaps following the lead of Victor, they continually changed the information on the reverse side while maintaining a uniform front. Although there are people and masks on the front, we don't see either people or machines on the back, only a list of records. It is on one of these sleeves that we come across the first example of a sleeve for a specific issue. Following up on the success of their 1911 double disc demonstration record, which was free with a 10-cent handling charge, in December 1913, Columbia issued the famous 25-cent sample double disc record. To every owner of a talking machine in the United States, here is the first chance you have ever had to buy a double disc record for 25 cents. One side of this sample record is a tenor solo by Henry Burr, "Good Night, Little Girl, Good Night," a record which is typical of the quality of all of the regular standard 10-inch Columbia records. The other side of this sample record carries a short message and a little music which you will find entertaining and instructive. When you get this record on the turntable of your machine, you will know all about it. It speaks for itself. This one record is a sample, not our own old demonstration record. The only reason why the price is set at 25 cents, 30 in Canada, is because we want you to know firsthand something about the superior and guaranteed quality of Columbia double disc records, and that they will play on your machine. Disc records are interchangeable. Now, during the middle teens, they used this less gaudy sleeve. And most of the times I've seen it, there is a rubber stamp on the guarantee saying, "Canceled." You can see this one lightly on the left side. By the late teens, Columbia started picturing and promoting their machines on the front of the sleeves. During that time, Victor did not follow suit with an inexpensive demonstration or sample record. And indeed, Columbia waited 10 years until 1923 to issue another 25-cent record. This time the record contained uninterrupted music, and instead let the informative sleeve do the talking. Modern collectors thus learn that the new process was not electrical recording, but was an improved lamination manufacturing process for the disc itself. This austere sleeve with no illustrations, just type, introduced the buyer to the most attractive label design Columbia had ever attempted, what we collectors have called the flag label. It was a break in a pattern which has always intrigued me. The record label formats that Victor and Columbia used during these years were rather austere and straightforward, with no-nonsense frills in the designs. On the other hand, the early sleeves had some of the most contrastingly decorative decorations. Columbia's first two designs could be seen as ludicrous. We showed you this before. As time went on in the 20s, Columbia did not picture people on the front of their sleeves. In the teens and 20s, we saw the machines they produced, but Columbia did not even illustrate people happily using these machines. On the back of the new process sleeve, they showed some people, but soon they got replaced by machines, and not even showing the people and the machines together. Victor also showed machines, but they preferred to show people, usually real and identifiable people. But until the mid-20s, these were on the back of the sleeves. The first notable ones were actually not heard on their records, but were claimed to have great influence on them. They were the famous dancing couple Vernon and Irene Castle. Victor issued a series of 4 sleeves illustrating several different dances and listing the records which featured the tempo and style for the named dance. These were generic company sleeves, which meant they were used on all records by all performers, classical, popular, spoken, comedy, not just the specific dance being shown. Victor then had at least 3 different series illustrating their classical music performers. Opera singers like McCormick, Gluck, Schumann-Heink, Caruso, Homer, Galli-Curci, violinists like Elman, Zimbalists, and Chrysler.
Say, kids, collect and save all of them. They're neat to trade with your friends.
I'll trade you a Gluck and a Zimbalist for a Caruso.
You got a Galli-Curci.
You drive a hard bargain.
I learned from the best.
Note that these are not only set up for the single-sided sleeves as single-sided sleeves for red seals, but also double-sided sleeves. And the records on some of these lists are popular music, not classical. Over the years, Victor had some interesting layouts for single-sided sleeves on the back. My favorites being the patriotic songs and the children's list with scenes in the nursery. There were also instructions on caring for your machine and the use of the needles, like for the tungstones, and about record albums. All sorts of interesting information on these things. 10 popular, and here's again the scene of the dancing party. In the mid-20s, Victor launched what was probably the most common sleeves of the era, which housed the best-selling records of the era. Waiting to play for you on your orthophonic credenza, we're going to hear one later on, were Leopold Stokowski, Paul Whiteman, Paderewski, and various opera singers. This was followed by another series of various performers, this time in silhouette. One showed opera singers in costume, another showed instrumentalists, a third seems to show band leader Paul Whiteman. They were trying to make nice with him, and you'll see why, and some instrumentalists. Now the fourth shows a marching band, most definitely not being led by John Philip Sousa. As the decade drew to a close and record sales started to decrease, Victor sleeves became imaginative and scarce. Some collectors have never seen these. Victor did 3 of these sleeves picturing specific performers on numbered records. I have the blue and the red pictured here. I swear to you that there is a yellow printed sleeve. And it proved so hard to read that they may have discontinued it. I swear I had one in my hands a month ago, and I'm looking at the back and I could barely read it, and I can't find it now. It's somewhere near the computer, I can tell you that. Everything is there I got piles of books, boxes of records like this tall, and I'm sitting around them. As the decade ended and corporate changes were made, the Victor division of Radio Victor Corporation of America tried to sell their Victor radio Electrola combinations to people trying to get by with selling pencils or apples on street corners. These are some very rare. Again, some people have never seen some of these sleeves. There's one of these there somewhere. Columbia sleeves had remained austere during the 1920s, promoting their new process and also then electrical vivatonal recording. Then suddenly came what many people think is the most outstanding sleeve in history. Although some have the mistaken opinion that this was issued to accompany what many feel is the most outstanding label in record history, the Paul Whiteman Potato Head, this sleeve is generic. Yes, there is a dance band on the upper right, but they're not specifically Whiteman's. There are partygoers on the lower right. On the lower left, there's a pianist accompanying a female singer in a rather daring backless and sideless gown. And on the upper left is a rather angry-looking male quartet and an equally angry female singer, and the 2 Black Crows. So maybe this is a 2 Black Crows sleeve. Now, there was a special sleeve for the huge-selling 2 Black Crows, but you've never seen it because this was only for Australia and New Zealand. Here in America, Columbia honored Ted Lewis with a special silver label, which is rarely found untarnished. Also rare is this sleeve, which does seem to be specifically designed for his records because the label design repeats in the sleeve. And it looks even more striking in person. And Leah and I were just commenting on the color design of the sleeve, that really this is like 2-strip Technicolor. Now, likewise, Columbia's subsidiary label, OK, gave Seeger Ellis a silver label and sleeve. A sleeve so rare that a noted collector and dealer who was a personal friend of Ellis has never come across this sleeve. Neither have I. Carrie says he has one. I should have gotten the picture from you then if I needed it. Somebody posted this picture about 3 or 4 years ago, and I still need the picture of the rear. Columbia's next step was royal blue with this sleeve. But earlier in the acoustical era, Columbia did have several operatic star performer-specific sleeves, possibly aimed at the Latin American audience. I've never seen either of these. I understand there are a few others. Now, this sleeve, with her holding the label, seems to pre-echo this famous Arto sleeve from the early 1920s. Now, this was going to lead to a study of the newly established independent labels. But time is up, and this will have to wait for next year.
All right, some tantalizing sleeves from the Biel archive. We have time for a few questions before the break. Yes, coming up with the mic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Many of the early Columbia sleeves had a side opening rather than a top opening.
That is
Could
right.
you comment on that, please?
It's very unusual. Actually, you didn't know whether you should have an opening on the top or the side. When you're doing something that had never been done before, how do you do that? The thing is that there may have also been the side opening because of the way they had designed the shelvings for something. In the last time I showed pictures of record stores and record distributors before and after, and as well as people's home shelving units, that before they were designed and you saw the unsleeved records, and afterwards you would see on those same types of holders the sleeved records. And that might have something to do with the fact that they're on the side. The British Columbia sleeves, all that I've noticed, go to the top. It's only the American ones that go to the side.
Thank you. I was really fascinated by the reference of the Vernon couple drawings included in the sleeves. Do you mind elaborating a little bit more on that? So particularly, what's the years in which these drawings are appearing? So I would assume it kind of correlates to the Dan crisis of the 1913, 1914. And
well, the Vernon and Irene Castle sleeves have a letter on them that is dated in 1914. So I believe that would be like 1914 and 1915. Vernon Castle was soon, I forget, but by maybe 1916 or so, was mustered into the army, and he was killed during World War I. So that would be where those sleeves were. One thing I didn't have a chance to do was to correlate which labels should go into which sleeves, other than in a few cases. Everything before the one with the on the Victor with the information printed on that would be the earlier styles of labels. That the Batwing only came in 1913, but of course that continued until 1926. The Columbia, the ones that showed the machines on the front, were where you would have the gold band style of label. The magic notes would be the ones that would have preceded the ones where they're showing the machines. There was always some overlap, of course, because some of the labels continued on for years after label changes were made.
And with that, I guess we should seal this discussion.
There's one more.
You one more? Brief one?
In addition to being a record collector, I'm also a book collector, and one of the things that they're parallel to what you're talking about is the issue in terms of dust jackets on books,
yes,
which are very generic very early on. In the 1920s, you see a lot of similarities and parallel in terms of starting to use more than one color in terms of ink. So book collectors have been dealing with this issue in terms of what are the earliest sleeves, but also the 20s is when you start to see using multiple colors, just as you do with some of the record label, with the record sleeves as well. Interesting point for books is that multicolor, 2 or 3 colors, it really is primarily for fiction, not for nonfiction books in the 1920s. But
I find some nonfiction books have striking gold or silver Art Deco designs on their the dust jackets. Of course, now with books, dust jackets are worth more than the books are. It's not so much.
1920s.
It's not so much that with records, although some of these colored sleeves are starting to be, where the Ted Lewis one cost me $5 or $6, but the other one I missed out on a few weeks ago was $10. But there are some of these things showing up on eBay, $40, $50, $60, which I think is ridiculous because these people these are people that have not come across the sleeves when they have been buying records themselves over the years. They still show up that way. Multicolored sleeves, more than this, you will not find. Like the 7-color lithograph designs. Only a few record companies had those on their label. For example, the Lyric. The 2 vertical Lyric labels before the gray for the lateral, those are beautiful designs. Their sleeves are very plain, though. But that's an interesting dichotomy, and we'll probably get more into that next year.
All right, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great lunch, great afternoon.